Afternoon again, everyone, and on behalf of this team, I just want to thank you for joining. Just some really quick Zoom rules. And the first and the major one is, if you're not speaking, please put your instrument or device on mute. If you're on a laptop, it's on the bottom left. It may look a little different if you're on a tablet or if you're on a phone or iPhone or an Android phone. But please, if you're not speaking directly, kindly put yourself on mute. That's the major one. The second one is, if during the presentation or during the course of the evening and you wish to ask a question, please use the chat feature. It is at the bottom of your screen if you're using a laptop. It may be at a different space if you're using a tablet or a phone. But please type your questions into the chat box. It would normally appear on the right. And there may be some chatter in the chat box. I'm going to ask as well to put your questions in caps so that Rosie, who would be reading those questions to our presenter, would be able to pick it up a little bit easier. So again, please mute yourselves if you're not speaking. And secondly, please post your questions in the chat group and ideally put those chat questions in caps so it's much more easily and readily seen and would be read by Rosie.
Great. Thanks, Audley. And now we move to our next item, number 2 in our agenda, the introductions. And here we have Jermaine will be talking a little bit about the structure of our organization.
So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on the psychological experience of COVID-19. As was stated earlier, I am Jermaine Hessler, President of the Ardent Alumni Association. For the last 3 months, we have been plagued by the effects of this virus globally. Most, if not all of us, we will agree that this has ushered in a new normal for us. So on account of that, the Ardent Alumni Association International Committee thought that it would be appropriate to host this webinar on assessing the psychological effects of COVID-19. So on behalf of the Ardent Alumni Association, I want to welcome everyone for joining this webinar. We know it's Sunday afternoon and there might be competing activities, so your presence here is well appreciated. Firstly, I want to say special welcome to our guest speaker, Dr. Joan Muir. Welcome, Dr. Joan. Right. This afternoon, we also want to make special mention of members of the association that are present. Firstly, we have members from the Ardent Alumni International Committee. Welcome to the members of the committee. This is the committee that is responsible for coordinating international activities of the association, such as this one. I am the chairperson for that currently, and our vice chair, Mr. Uton Henry, who is also on this webinar, serves there as support. We also have other members of the committee present. So welcome to the International Committee. We also have representatives present from the Ardent Alumni Foundation. Now, the Ardent Alumni Foundation is the body of the association responsible for raising funds for our major projects on behalf of the Ardent Alumni Association. So one of the major accomplishments that some of us are aware of by the Ardent Alumni Foundation is that of the solarization of the school, and there are ongoing projects that the membership of the foundation is involved in, and that foundation is chaired by Mrs. Flo Darby. I'm not sure if she's already joined. I'm not able to see the participants right now, but welcome to Mrs. Darby as well as all the other members of the board of the Ardent Alumni Foundation that have made this call. We also have representatives from various chapters, their presidents and the executive. So let me start with my own executive. So we have membership here from the executive team from right here in Jamaica. So welcome to all executive members of the Jamaica Alumni Association. We also want to make welcome our presidents from the various chapters. So the Arden Alumni Association, we currently have a number of chapters, mainly in, well, they're all in North America. So firstly, we have Toronto, and that's currently being led by Denzel Davis, who you heard earlier. So formal welcome to Denzel. We also have New York. I'm not sure if there is anyone yet who has joined from New York, but their president, Elsa VP Horace Lynch. Then we go down to Florida, and the president there is Dennis Livingston. He's also on this. Welcome, Dennis. And we have also Mr. Houghton Henry, president for Atlanta. Welcome, presidents. Welcome, executive team. Welcome to the membership. Special welcome to those who are not affiliated with any chapter. And special welcome to those who are not affiliated with Arden High School. So we really appreciate you being here today. And generally, just let me welcome everyone. And I hope that you will all be positively impacted by today's session.
Thank you, Jermaine. Just a couple other things that are happening with the school is that with the alumni, we just established an alumni office. It's currently being furnished for both the foundation and the alumni association. So we're growing. That's just for mention. We're not going to spend much time on that. And then we had we were supposed to have a Teachers Day, which is recognition of our teachers, but that has been postponed for the until the next academic year, when hopefully we're in control of this this thing that has crippled our lives so much. So those are things that we need to be cognizant of. We're not gonna go and so we're at that point where we want to hear from Dr. Muir, and so we ask Portia to just
a minute, Denzel.
Sure.
I'm sorry about that. We just want to pause because I have to make a special welcome. I'm going through the participants, and right. I'm seeing a representation here from JAAHS.
Yes.
That
what
is Jamaica Association of Alumni. I don't remember the correct thing, but
high schools.
Yes, it's an association of Alumni Association. Sorry. So special welcome. I'm not sure who is represented there, but I'm seeing the participant there. Welcome.
Okay. Can that person recognize himself?
Okay. Carla Mary.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So welcome, Carla.
Okay. Good. Good. All right. Thanks for that, Jermaine. Portia, your turn.
Good afternoon, everybody. If you watch a lot of cable TV like me, you probably heard the phrase the death of expertise. And a lot of people have been bemoaning that. So it is really my singular honor and a privilege to be able to introduce to you this afternoon someone who is definitely and unquestionably an expert in her field. Dr. Joan Muir is a born Jamaican, like most of us here. And she took a wrong turn early in life. I gather she went to St. Andrew High School rather than Arden. It got corrected somewhat when she went to the University of the West Indies, which she left in 1995. After leaving UWI, she went and did her PhD in clinical psychology at Fordham University in New York, following which she interned at the prestigious Yale University and then did a postdoctoral fellowship in childhood and adolescent psychology at Columbia University. So she's very well schooled on the matters she's going to address us on today. She's a charismatic speaker. She's spoken in many jurisdictions, from the United States of America to Mexico, Brazil, Hong Kong, Sweden, the Netherlands. And she's well received wherever she goes. Since 1997, she's been an assistant professor at the University of Miami. And she specializes in matters ranging from family therapy to cultural issues to conflict resolution. I gather that some of her passions are engaging fathers in therapy, which we all know is very important. I can't overstate how excited I am to have her with us, and I'm sure that you will all give her the warm, ardent welcome. She's a well-published as well author. I can't go through everything that I've seen on her resume, but as we all face the anxieties, not only of COVID-19, but also these, what I'm going to call race riots in the United States of America, I think it's really a time that we're anxious to hear from you, Dr. Muir. And so my part is ended, and we're extending a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was outstanding. Thank you, Portia. It's not just that you knew the content of my resume, but you certainly put your own effort into it. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I hope I don't offend anyone, but I am a proud St. Andrew alumni.
So sad, so sad, so sad.
But I have a lot of dear friends from Arden High School, and I want to acknowledge, to my surprise, I just got notice. First of all, I have some extended family members on here to support me. I'm quite surprised. I see Mark and Andrea and Herman. So thank you. I know Tracy's in the background there if Mark is there. And these are all Arden people here to support me. And thank you, Horace. And I'm sure Maxine is on, and she's an alumni as well of Arden High School. And my classmate from the University of the West Indies, she can verify that I actually went, Lois Hemmings, who, by the way, her name was Lois Muir at Arden. So many people thought we were cousins or sisters while we were at the University of the West Indies on Irvine Hall. So I am going to be frank with you, as that's the only way I can be. The members of the audience who know me know that I am. This has been a very painful 2.5 months. And the last week is incredibly painful. And those of you who are in Jamaica, this may not resonate with you. I hope it does. But this has been a painful week. And my concern is not the race riots. My first concern is something I've known in my 32 years of living in this country, is that this country was built on inequality. It's not a device of certain individuals. The structure of this country with its potential greatness is built on inequality. And we are seeing it demonstrated blatantly during this week. So towards the end of our conversation, our gracious hosts, the committee, have given me freedom to discuss that topic as well. I'm happy to take your comments on what is occurring. I've given it a lot of thought. I've been schooled very well in the Association of Black Psychologists, and I'm grateful to them for educating me so that these events are not surprising to me, albeit very painful. We are in the middle of a global pandemic. And I want to just qualify and to say that psychology is a science. And many people might say it's a soft science. And I think that's a fair statement to make. And I have been trying to be so respectful of the science of this pandemic. And I will share some of that with you, because I think that without that, we're anchored in ignorance and we are likely to make mistakes that hurt us. This is a global pandemic, and it is not like anything the human race has seen before. Why would I say that? I'm sure you've heard that in 1918 there was a Spanish flu, which didn't seem to come our way in Jamaica, but it certainly engulfed a good part of the world. But the world then is not the world we have now. I have been privileged to travel all over the world, and I'm fully aware that today I could leave my home in Florida, and in 22 hours I could be in Beijing. That is the story of the COVID-19 virus. That is exactly why it is problematic, because our world is connected in such a way that it has never been before, which means traveling along with people has been the travel of the COVID-19 virus. There are many people who have asked me, they say the reports are confusing about the virus and the information is changing and they don't trust the science. And there's a lot of politics in the United States. There's information that's being suppressed. We have clear evidence in the state of Florida that data regarding the rates of infection and the number of deaths in Florida have been suppressed. That's out there already. The person responsible for that data was fired 2 weeks ago in order to continue the charade of, we're not going to tell you the deaths. And I've known this for a while because I have first responders in my practice, and they were told we don't need those reports anymore. So there is false information and there is a false sense of security about how many people are infected and how many people are dying. That may not be true where you are, but I'm saying there is a lot of political machinations ready to get us to go out and shop and restore the economy, which will meet some people's political goals. If you put that aside, there is still some confusion about COVID-19. And the reason is the way science operates. Science does not develop findings in 2 months. And the public is being fed findings in 2 months. There is no certainty in 2 months. What is occurring is a normal process among scientists has become public. And the public is confused by the process, but it is normal. Which is science, and many of you know this already, science goes about testing a hypothesis, and it has to be tested over multiple situations across multiple populations before they publish it. We can't do that when people are dying. So I'm letting you know that one of my dear friends was sharing with me in a major hospital in Miami that they were changing the treatment protocols for COVID-19 every day. Every day they would meet at 5 o'clock and say, what is the treatment protocol? So some of the things that you've heard have changed because there just wasn't enough evidence, but people were dying and they tried what they could. Have you noticed you don't hear about ventilators anymore? There was a big hue and cry about ventilators because guess what? They've discovered they were wrong, that COVID-19 patients don't need ventilators. It isn't a pneumonia. It's actually more like spots of blood all over your lungs that need to be treated a different way. Ventilators were actually spreading them. But because people were oxygen deficient, the natural response was put them on ventilators. So this is not a judgment. This is what you do when you've got 2 months to save people's lives. So here are some things that we do know. We do know that COVID-19, by the way, I just want to say, I was asked about that already. Coronavirus has been around for decades, just so you know. There's a whole group of viruses, just like influenza. There's multiple types of influenza. Coronavirus was around. This particular one, as best as we know it today, you notice my caution, has been around, and Denzel is right, since 2019. So the whole concept was that it started in Wuhan, China. And we're not able to verify that, but that's the best of what we know today. And we can be comfortable with the best of what we know today. But there are reports now, as physicians have the time to go back to medical records, that there were strains of this virus in Italy, for example, from October, in China from October. And so here we have it, is that it has spread all over the world and gripped us in fear. And that is not a good place to be. And so that's why I'm saying to you, read the information carefully, listen to the scientists carefully, try to get out of the politics, but understand that it is fluid and it is changing. And there's a lot of politics on top of it. But we do know some basics. It is spread through breathing, talking. These droplets go out in the air and they spread. There is more information about these droplets that is concerning, that they can stay in a room. For example, this room that I'm speaking in for the entire hour, I could leave droplets in there that would last several hours after I have left, because I am constantly speaking. They didn't know that before. You know, there was the idea that, you know, smaller droplets would disappear, heavier droplets, I mean, would fall to the ground, and, you know, the smaller droplets would spread. That's why we were asked to stay at home. Many of us are still working at home. We're being asked to wear masks in public. That is to reduce the idea, the idea is to reduce transmission of the virus to other people. But that creates a psychological dilemma. We're literally walking around afraid of each other. Let's just tell the truth. That's what it is. I go to Costco. The first time I went to Costco, there was 200 people lined up. By the way, let me just be clear that for those people who don't live in the United States, Costco is a warehouse shopping with sort of, if you want to say, larger volume of items at a lower price. And I got there early in the morning and there were 200 people online. I almost freaked. I was so uncomfortable. I have not gone back to Costco until last Thursday. There were 200 people online at 8:15 in the morning. And I waited 45 minutes to get in. And that was the first time in public I saw masks. We were not required, but there were some people with masks and gloves, and I could feel the anxiety inside of me, like, okay. I am a obsessively washing of hands kind of person. So now I'm washing even more. Because again, these droplets can drop on anything. You pick it up like a phone, you become infected. But to walk around in masks there's a subtle message that we are harmful to each other. And that degrades our humanity. We can't hug, we can't shake hands. I met someone, I've volunteered, which is probably how I got into this assignment. I was asked to volunteer for the Consulate of Jamaica in Miami to offer support services for Jamaicans who were stuck here. I'm not talking about people who came to shop, who came to visit their families. I'm talking tons of young people on J1 visas who came for some sort of short-term academic or internship experience, stuck. No one here that they know in the state that they're in to stay with, and they can't go home. And I remember at the reception of the first group to get on a plane, to be allowed to get on a plane to go to Jamaica, there was a meeting the night before. And I actually just went to say goodbye to a young woman I'd been counseling for weeks. And she was brought, it was such a touching story. She was an intern at a hotel on South Beach. And if any of you know anything about Miami Beach, South Beach is the hot spot with thousands of tourists every day. Well, when I met her, there was nobody on South Beach, not even in the daytime. The only people there were cops. And she had lost all her classmates, so to speak. They were able to go home. But Jamaica's borders closed early, which was a good thing, but it was a bad thing for her. So all her 9 other cohort, they left, and she was left alone in an apartment building. You can, in the silence of one of the busiest places in the world, in the silence by the time I met her, she had already been alone for 2 weeks. And I have to tell you, she's very resilient and she's doing very well. But she was just sobbing when the consulate staff person was trying to get information about her. Eventually, they moved her to another location and got her in contact with other people. But the isolation is maddening. And it's worse when you don't live in this country. So the problem with COVID-19 is we were asked, and to a limited measure, lots of places are opening up now, including Jamaica, but our movement is still limited and our caution is still high, and it is for the protection of our health and our well-being. So the simple act of social isolation is distressing. Lots of people, young and old, were in their homes alone in an unknown duration of time, which ended up for us being like 8 weeks. So people could not see their family members. There's an understanding that, you know, whoever's in your household, if you're gonna get COVID-19, you're gonna get it. No one is asking you to isolate, but if you know you have it, they ask you to go in a room and to isolate for 2 weeks until your symptoms have cleared. That's still distressing because it's more than likely the rest of your family is going to get it. But there's some strange things that this experience of a pandemic brought. What are some of them? We were advised, and that is still true, that older people are more vulnerable. We were also advised that people with pre-existing conditions were more vulnerable. So I had a patient who wanted to see me, and I struggle with that because I've been getting brand new patients and I need to see people at least for the first time, even in this situation. And he said, my girlfriend, she's got cancer, she's recovering, she is, you know, her immune system, and I need to be careful. I mean, just this entire conversation that we would have never, these are people in their 30s healthy, we would have never had this conversation a year ago. And the worst part, I think all of us saw, was the center of the pandemic in New York City. It's not that it was any different everywhere else. Everywhere, once the infection hits, there's a point at which it goes up and then it just starts to exponentially increase. And I think Jamaica is fortunate it never got there, but that was the cycle. And when it became this exponential increase daily, infections were doubling by the day. And after about 2 or 3 weeks of that, the deaths start. So it takes a while before people get infected, get sick, and when they die. When you hear statistics like there's 102,000 people who have died in the United States, and 60% of them look like many of us. And you may not know who they are, but I'm guaranteeing you that there are Jamaicans in that group. There are Jamaican nurses in New York who have died, and they were trying to help other people. There were UPS drivers, FedEx drivers, grocery store people who never got to stay home, who never got to protect themselves, who when they were working, masks weren't even discussed. So they've gotten ill and they have died. This is something that when this all clears, we have this tremendous amount of work to do called grief. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. It's called grief because I don't know of anyone who hasn't known someone who has died, either here, because I live in Florida, but definitely in New York. And it doesn't matter where they're from, we should be troubled. But I'm letting you know that many people born in Jamaica who migrated to the United States have died. And it's simply because they were doing their job. They were doing their job faithfully every day, and that job was considered an essential service. They could not stay home. They could not socially isolate. They were out there in the public, getting exposed day to day to day to day. They eventually got sick, and they eventually died. We've never seen anything like this. And it hasn't stopped. As much as there's an easing, you can watch the numbers, they're still going up. So there's some strange things that has occurred. I do family therapy work by specialty. And so this is very troubling for me. There's something very cruel about COVID-19. It has separated families. And like I said, maybe less so in Jamaica, but definitely in the United States and in Canada. What are some of the rules? If your family member is in the hospital, you cannot visit them. It's a contagious disease. They're not going to allow you to be in the presence of your family member. So you are outside and hoping the doctors will come or nurses will come and tell you what, you're not here, you're not able to communicate with them. And even if they're healthy, there are many grandmothers who for 2 months never saw their grandchildren because no one wanted to visit and make grandma sick. We've never had that experience. It is painful. It has split up families. You're choosing between your emotional connection to your family and your wish to stay alive. That's what you're asked to do. And for some people, it wasn't worth it. And the worst part was, if your family member did die, what do you do? Because up until a few weeks ago, you couldn't gather together for more than 10. And you know how we are as people. We like the big homegoing funerals to honor. We will wait for weeks for Auntie Sue to come from England and brother so-and-so to come from New York. We wait weeks at great expense so that they can have a proper funeral, as they would say in Jamaica. All that's out the water. You know, last Thursday I was told, and this is a Canadian story, that someone who's a second mother to me was sharing how painful it was that she did not even know that one of her oldest friends who married the same year she did, that the husband had died. By the time her friend called her, it was all over. And all she could say was, I couldn't believe he went like this. He went into the nursing home and he was gone within a week. Our children couldn't come. Our children could not come. They couldn't fly to Canada. They're in the United States. They couldn't go. She buried her husband without their children present. That is unheard of. So on top of the grief of losing a spouse, here you have it, that because of social distancing restrictions, which are to save lives, we aren't able to honor, to grieve, to comfort the way we would normally do. So what is the future looking like? To our best estimates, there is going to be infection continuing throughout this year, 2020, at least in the United States. And in North America, period. That includes Canada and all our neighbors south. As a matter of fact, the pandemic is growing very rapidly in Latin America now, because they were in winter, they were in summer, and now they're in winter, and their infection rates are spiking in Mexico, in Chile. So what is going to happen? What is going to happen is we have to live with a new normal, where we're more careful, where we wash our hands more often, where we learn to go out in public and buy groceries with a mask on, where we're reminded that someone close to us could actually be a source of infection. Or worse, we could be the source of infection. Because there's many of us who have no symptoms, but we might have been carrying the virus and we just didn't know and we passed it on. And to the best of our knowledge, this is going to continue for the rest of 2020. There's talk about a vaccine. Again, rushing through a vaccine is not the answer, because it means that you could actually be giving people something that's harmful. There must be multiple tests to make sure it is A, effective, and B, safe. So it doesn't look like it's going to happen until perhaps early 2021. So how do we adjust to this, right? The psychological impact is all across. The shock, many people are just thrown up, grabbing your stuff, running out of offices. Schools were closed without a plan. They found a plan eventually, but there was no plan when school closed. They just closed the schools and people just had to adapt. So some strengths have come out of COVID-19. Some of the positives are, we've learned to adapt. Here are some of the positives. People who were socially isolating actually connected with people that they were too busy for. So many people have connected, talked on the phone to friends they haven't talked to in years, who live in other countries, in other spaces, calling cousins, family members that they were rushing around. For myself, I've always felt I was goal-oriented and whatever I was doing was purposeful. But sometimes it's too much, too busy. And it just amazes me how life has become so streamlined and so smooth, so clear to me what is important. Because in the face of a pandemic, you start to recognize what really matters. And some of the other stuff is trivial. Like there were jokes about manicures, right? And pedicures and haircuts. We've learned to survive without those. I mean, can you believe that? Can you believe that? I've seen people on CNN who I didn't even know had beards. It's incredible. Because people have just learned to, I've got to go out and do my job. There is no barber. And whatever reason, they never cut their hair. Somehow the women have managed. I don't know. They all seem to look so glamorous and not flawed. But you can see hair growing. You can see different hairstyles because people's hair is just different. So there's some good things. We've learned to be flexible. We've learned to remember those who we love, who we weren't probably spending time with before. But here's the stuff I want to help you with today, the grief. There is no proper way to grieve. You've got to do it your way and in your time. There's usually shock, anger, bitterness, questioning of self, questioning of God, questioning of why that person left and not me, or why them, not me, whatever the questions are. You have to give time to release it. And one of the things I want to emphasize is we have to spend more time, what I call spending time in the silence. It's not even as elegant as meditation. Meditation is like another step, like just being still and allow your feelings to flow through you so that you can release them. Don't bottle them up. Don't tighten them up. Don't go drinking or distracting yourself with food. Let's just know that there's some painful times that we're going through and you need to release them. But there's sometimes, and many of you have other strategies like prayer, like reading the Bible, like fellowship. But when none of those are enough, it is okay to go for mental health counseling. Nothing ever stopped. Whenever I've been asked to speak, and it's been frequent throughout this pandemic, mental health has never stopped. We are an essential service. And there is a recognition. We have to understand that grief can bind you. It can create for you a dismal future and make you lose hope. You can ask for help. Be free, be not ashamed to ask for help. And calling out a counselor, going to see a psychologist, there's no shame in that. So I've said a lot. I'm going to pause and give it back to the host so that I can take your questions.
Can you put me back, please?
Denzel, it looks like I caught you off guard. You were still relaxed, listening.
We're seeing two questions in the chat box.
I know you have an agenda. I looked at the time. I saw 5:41, so I decided to release, and I'm happy to continue and take questions, to respond more specifically to your needs by taking your questions.
You hearing me, guys? Or am I still on mute?
No, we're hearing you.
All right. There are questions in the chat box, and Rosemary will pick those up and ask.
Okay. Question is, how do you help family members who consume and are terrified by conspiracy theory?
Wow, the first one is a tough one. You people don't joke. So let me say to the person who put that question out there, if your family member was that personality before, then it's not going to change in COVID-19, right? So first of all, some conspiracy theories are true. Some of us who are listening, we don't have the facts, we don't have the history, so some people who sound crazy have been proven decades later to have been correct. So all I'm saying is if something sounds like it has no basis in reality and you're troubled for your loved one, the best way to help someone is not to confront them. That never works, right? So we're trained in therapy whenever we see an obstacle to go around it, like a river goes around a stone. Do you see that? The river doesn't move the stone, the river goes around it. So if you feel like your family member is saying things that are not based on reality, you can share with them some things that you have read. Just share with them. Sometimes that clears up people's understanding. When I say share, I mean preferably in writing. Because remember, we're all sensitive to being argued at, right? So we're likely to resist even more. But if they're in danger, if their conspiracy theory is creating danger, like for example, someone who thinks, well, it doesn't come through droplets, I don't have to wash my hands. Well, that's a concern. Then think about the relationship. Use the relationship to make the difference. You can say something like, I know that's how you feel, but I want to be safe. So go with me on this one, right? Just do it this way because I want to be safe. Don't put the pressure on them, because when you put pressure on people, they resist harder. So if you're in a family relationship, you can use the love and affection for transformation. So you say something like, I know that's how you feel, but I'm just asking you, since we're all together in the house, can you just wash your hands before you do so-and-so? And I'm sure that's not the example, but I'm using a practical example, which is don't go at people like that because they resist more. Give them information if you have it. And if you think they're in danger or you're going to be in danger from their conspiracy theory, then use the love and affection of your family relationship to say, you know, it would just help me if, just hear me out on this one, or just try this, just because I need this to feel safe in this pandemic. Hope I was helpful.
Anne-Marie.
Thank you. All right, the next one is, I'm a manager and lead a team of 15 people. My CEO wants to convert all positions to work from home. What is the psychological impact of now having to permanently work from home due to COVID-19?
I knew I was going to get that one. So some of us are celebrating working from home. I know I'm one of them, because I used to have a wicked commute and I am so happy. And I get to walk in the mornings instead of rushing to get dressed and hit the road. But this was gonna come because, look, corporations are about money and convenience. This is much easier if you work at home. It's much cheaper. They can shrink their footprint. There is some safety to working at home. It's your own bathroom, you know? Let's just face facts here. Bathrooms are one of the most contagious areas. Because again, remember we talked about droplets, right? When you flush a toilet, all that spray, droplets spread, even if you've left the bathroom and come back. So there is some benefit to being at home, but if you're uncomfortable, think about what is the mission of your organization. So if it's a team working organization, then it is to your detriment to have people work at home. It very much is. You can use technology to connect and have meetings, but it is not the same as having a relationship in the office where people just talk to each other, actually help each other hands-on with projects. So think about that. So the negative is if it's a teamwork concept, you're going to lose that. If you're forced, then you have to think of ways in which you can recreate that team atmosphere. During COVID-19, you don't have many options. But if you think long-term, there can be meetings, there can be gatherings. You can even have a once-a-week staff meeting. Just because people are working at home doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity to meet. But I would, because you have 16 people, I would also try to get out of myself and just start to hear their feedback. Because you will hear complaints and you will also hear potential solutions. And remember, we fundamentally have issues with change. We fight things that are different. So just remember, some things we will eventually find out they're just fine. Remember ships? Well, you don't remember that, but your parents can talk about that. Ships versus airplanes. You know, we resist change. There's something about us as human beings. So just remember, it's possible that 6 months from now, you don't feel the same way. But try to think about, as a manager, whatever you think is missing from being at home, try to think about how you can use technology to compensate. Notice I said compensate. It's never going to replace the contact with people. And you have to ask the management, the higher up management, to guarantee technical support, because it isn't fair to have people working with Wi-Fi when they were connected to a powerful network. It's not fair to them that they don't have IT support at home. It's not fair to them that they don't have phones. So companies should be challenged to provide these things. If they're saying they're going to move permanently into working at home, then they need to provide all of that. I shouldn't be using my home phone. You should be setting me up. So you can also defend and protect your team by making sure the tools that they need are provided for.
Yeah, ask a question?
Hi, Joan. Hi, Joan. May I just jump in here?
Yes, of course. Well, you can't ask me. You have to ask the host.
I did.
Go ahead, Mark.
He's allowed.
He did.
So Joan, one of the things, you know, at home, Tracy and I have been discussing is just this whole matter of how the world of work is changing, will change. You know, many owners of companies, CEOs are now thinking of not bringing back the large portions of their workforce, and instead to start renting out, reconfiguring the office space and renting out to other people. From a psychological standpoint, what should HR leaders look, you know, be prepared for in terms of potential fallout amongst the workforce, amongst members of the staff, in terms of just that mental adjustment, that mental shift? Many persons are just keyed in on going to work, they're fit into a routine. You know, will we see a lot of depression in the workforce going forward? Is this something you're thinking about actively?
Yeah, the isolation can be, first of all, from a practical point of view, not everyone has a large enough home with an office space. That's a problem. So how do you concentrate at home if you do not have a private space to do your work? How do you work at home if you don't have a private space to store anything, equipment, documents? So a lot of you save things electronically, but there are some professions in which people are still using paper for good reason. For example, lawyers. So what I'm saying to you is HR has to think about the mission of the company and what it is providing, because that is creating discomfort for an employee that I have to be doing the same work and there's no support. But there's psychological issues as well. First of all, some people work very well if they're just in a safe environment. For example, I'm very fortunate. This is my office. It is in my home and I have that space. But what if you have children? What if you have no space? What if children are screaming and you're on a conference call? What does that really mean? And the second thing is, when people are struggling with work, who sees that? That's where my concern is. When people are struggling, you can see it on people's faces when they come to the office where they're struggling. How do you as a manager offer support and protection when you no longer see your employee? You don't know what they're struggling with. So for some people, it's liberating, but it tends to be people who are very solid materially, have a home office and can function. But many people are not in that space, and forcing them to be in that space is not best for them. Also, some people need a separation of space because some people will just work non-stop. The accountant who manages our books at the Institute says she's up from 6 in the morning and she's working till midnight. That is crazy stuff. She never did that in the office. She got in at 8, she probably left at worst, maybe 6. So there's a problem. Some people cannot separate their work life when they're actually working at home. And so they'll go eat dinner and come back and go, and that can create burnout. And burnout does not help a company. Because if you're burnt out, you're not efficient, you're not thoughtful, and you're much more likely to get into conflict with other employees. And you have to think about also confidentiality. There are some professions in which confidentiality is paramount, but most companies have something that is confidential. There's something you have that is confidential. How do you protect that? So for me, I think HR should be looking about that the company is actually preparing employees, training employees on using technology, offering support, that managers are trained to look out for employees who are depressed or having difficulty in a different way because now they're physically separated. I could go on, but I think that those are major risks.
Excellent. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you. We have the next one. If someone you work closely with has been furloughed, how do you help them to deal with their natural uncertainty and resentment?
Got it. I like the combination, the anxiety and the resentment. I have young people in my family who've been furloughed, and I hear the anger, right? One in particular is from a very prestigious company that was having financial trouble, and within 2 weeks of stay-at-home orders, furloughed their employees. They were not losing money at the time, but it was an excuse in order to deliver something that they wanted all along, which was to stop the bleeding, the financial bleeding. So they used their employees as sacrificial lambs for some strategic business decisions that they made that were costly. And that is going to create resentment. So one of the things we have to do in life is to accept that we were never in control. See, part of our problem as human beings is that we think we were in control. We are not in control of anything except this domain in which our spirit exists, this body in which our spirit exists. And we have to learn to release. We have to learn to release. We have to separate. That's your decision and my decision. So your decision is to furlough me. We have to separate ourselves. What do I mean? Don't get into maybe I did something wrong, or maybe we didn't work hard enough, or, and don't get into accept whatever it is that management has done, which typically they will protect themselves under the guise of we're leadership, we need to stay there. But at some point, you have to say to yourself, this is my life, this is my destiny, and I am going to move forward. And if you're people of faith, then you have to recognize that the only power in this universe is one presence, and that is the divine presence that controls our lives. And you have to release, because what we discover, a lot of times, we may be holding on to something that we needed to release on our own, but we didn't. And there is another opportunity coming a year or so later, but we cannot see it now. You have to have faith for the future. But from a practical point of view, you have to start looking at your finances. Do you have enough to eat, wear clothes, buy gas? If you can't, start thinking about family and friends. You can ask for help. If you need to catch somewhere until things are better. I'm a firm believer in basics first, food and shelter. If you don't have those, then this emotional conversation does not belong to you. You must take care of your basic needs. But after you take care of your basic needs, you do want to work on that resentment, because at the end of the day, you are in control and no one can determine your destiny. They can block your path temporarily, but remember that you as a human being have unlimited potential as a God-created being to live a life of purpose and of dignity, and never let anyone, never buy into the lie that someone can take that away from you. They cannot. You will give it to them. They cannot take it away from you. And the third thing is, you are not your job. That's part of our problem. You are not your job. I love being a psychologist. If you haven't seen my passion yet, then I don't know what else I need to do. But I am not my job. I recognize that I have a purpose, and I was very fortunate to be receptive to the call from a very young age that this was the vehicle to express my purpose. And so there's been problems at the university. I built my practice. So I could tell you stories, not unlike what we're going through. It's called racism with a capital letter. So we have to remember that we always have different ways to express our gifts and our talents. And I am very clear that I'm not stuck on one thing. I will always be a psychologist. I am proud to be that. But I will not let someone take something away from me, because in reality, they cannot. What I need to do, they'll say reinvent yourself. That's not even what I think. Stay true to your purpose. Something else will emerge for you. As long as you're clear on this is my purpose, something else will emerge for you to do, and it will feed you and your family. I see a lot of questions on the chat. I don't know if we're getting to them.
Yeah, Rosemary.
Yes, I'm about to ask some more. Okay, what tips can you give for young children, teens, on how to handle the changes? As you said, the changes were so drastic and no time to prepare them for the changes.
It was drastic. I mean, I can tell you in my county here, it was dramatic. Like Monday there was school and Friday there was no school. And that's part of the complication of working from home. Children are at home. How do you work and help your children do their schoolwork? The issue is you cannot. So we need to be honest here. Those of us who are in managerial roles, there's no way you can produce the same amount of work. So let's not turn this into 21st century slavery, okay? If your children, luckily summer holidays are coming, but it was a hard thing to do your work and help your children sit on laptops without teachers and do theirs. I think we need to be honest with our children. The guidance for children is the same during COVID-19 as anywhere. Tell your children the truth, but tell them at their developmental level. You tell a 4-year-old, there is a disease that people can catch by coughing or sneezing into the air and someone picks it up. So I need for you to wash your hands when I tell you to wash your hands. And when I tell you not to touch certain things, I need for you to pay attention because I don't want you to get sick. That's a 4-year-old. You're not lying. You're not avoiding COVID-19 and saying they're 4 years old, they shouldn't be told. When you get to the teens, you can tell them more. And we shouldn't lie. If you're afraid, don't lie. Your children know you're lying. Just say, listen, we have some difficult times ahead, and here's what I know. I know that you're gonna have to work from home in school. I know you can't see your friends, and we need to protect each other from being sick. The rest, I don't know. But when I know, me or your dad will tell you. Don't lie. Because when you lie, your children will not trust you. They see it in your eyes when you're afraid and you're saying you're not afraid. Don't lie. Just tell them at their age level the information that you have, and what you don't know, say, I don't know, but I will find out. And when I find out, I'll tell you. And it's especially hard because young people are graduating with no job prospects. And you have to tell the truth. I'm gonna help you as much as I can, but you're gonna have to work really hard because there's less jobs out there. And you may not be able to fulfill your dream as fast as you thought, but know that we're behind you 100% and we know that you can fulfill your dream. So that's my guidance. Tell children the truth, but tell them at their developmental level. And whatever you don't know, don't lie about it. Just say, I don't know, but I'll find out.
Here's another one. Have you seen an escalation in domestic violence as a result of extended stay-at-home orders?
So a lot of politicians have been talking about this. The data isn't there yet. Remember, unfortunately, and I do, as part of my public work, community work, I do work with abused families in setting up programs all over the United States and internationally about abuse. And one of the definitions of abuse is domestic violence in the presence of a child. That is considered abuse. The child is not getting hit, but you're fighting. We have not seen those numbers. That does not mean it didn't occur. Because remember, all of this is by reporting. And because children are not in school, where they're with other adults, they don't necessarily tell other adults. It just kind of leaks out. Well, there was a lot of screaming last night, and so on and so on. People are also not going to physicians. So physicians are not seeing bruises because, again, just like myself, most physicians are only seeing people who have to be seen for the first time. So you could have a problem, nobody's seeing it because nobody's seeing the bruises, and nobody's seeing what's occurring. So we don't know yet. A lot of people speculated that there would be an increase. And it's because people are tightly together. But I also feel, because I work a lot with families, the dynamics of an abusive relationship are not physical. They are emotional. It is about control. And remember, part of why we don't solve domestic abuse is we keep focusing on the perpetrator. It is not. It's a relationship in which both people need each other so much that they participate in an unhealthy relationship, one of submission and one of domination. COVID-19 didn't create that. That was there before. So those of us who are good family members, good friends, good neighbors, as we start to emerge out of social isolation and we see things, look a little deeper, check a little harder, because some things are occurring and they're usually visible. The relationship is not healthy. So you can't hide something like that. So we may be able to hide bruises, but it's hard for us to hide conflict. So let's all be sensitive to the potential for domestic violence. Possibly as we get closer to the end of I wouldn't say the end of the year, maybe in the fall, like September, October, we're gonna be able to catch up with that data. But it's a good hypothesis that it's increasing because of the isolation, because domestic violence works in isolation.
Let me do one that is closely aligned to this. Have you seen better relationships being formed as folks realize life for all of us has changed? I have neighbors who now say good morning.
Absolutely. I always say that one, and I forgot at the start of this meeting. Thank you so much for that question. Seriously, people have gotten closer to their family for sure. And because we all love to say we love our family, but sometimes we get too busy and we forget to connect. That's for sure. That's a positive. Anything that means spending more time with our family is a good thing. But the neighbor part, that is universal. I'm so glad to hear that, because again, because work is such a big part of our lives, and after work is the gym or prayer meeting. Many people show up at night and then just go to bed, and they're not in contact with their neighbors. I am amazed, because we're very fortunate in South Florida, and that's probably why we got through the pandemic with a lower number of infections than expected. Still not low, but lower than expected. Is the same reason for Jamaica, the sunshine. It means that our homes are open, not locked up. It means that we can walk. And in walking, I have discovered some people who lived on my street that I was just like, I had no clue. So I see some people with some really buff bodies walking, literally like 2-3 times a week. I'd be seeing people walking past them outside. And I'm like, they live here. And all I can think is perhaps they went to the gym in the evenings, now they're walking, and you get to know your neighbors. That is a positive. Closer to family, getting to know neighbors better. And a sense that we're all, it's not just getting to know them better, there's a sense that we're all vulnerable. And so that makes you sort of more empathetic and more willing to connect to other people who are not our blood relatives. Absolutely agree, that is one of the positives. Any other questions?
Yes. Any tips on the amount of media to consume?
That's always a good one. Let's talk about social media first. I'm not a fan of social media. Most people who know me, I post things that I think are professionally helpful. I think social media took up a lot of people's time even before this. And I think we have to be watchful. If you're messaging people, then there's a real-time connection. We need to spend more time in real-time connection. So we have a human contact. Many of us are losing that and substituting social media for real-time connection. But there's a second problem with social media, is that the information is not vetted. See, newspapers can't risk putting certain things out there. Cable news networks can't risk. They've got to vet their stuff because someone's going to come after them and sue them. But, you know, there's a democracy to social media. I can post whatever, say whatever. And some of the information is not correct. There are people who are close to me who have brought me information that I know was scientifically not correct, but they believed it because they got it on social media. You have got to be discerning about where your information comes from. Remember what I said earlier? If you think scientists sound so sure of themselves, it's the least sure of profession. Stuff is tested so many times before they make a public announcement. So try to look for the public announcements on the science thing and not the first thing that pops up. But also, being socially isolated, the temptation is to live on social media more. I say call people more. And if you don't like to call, like the millennials say, we don't call, we text. Then text more. At least try to keep a connection in real time. And lots of people have been having Zoom parties. Lots of young people have just gotten together on Zoom just to get together. It is better to have that human connection. I really think that there's social media is powerful. Listen, on Monday, a man in Central Park, New York, a white woman was calling the police to say that he was threatening her, and he was not. His sister put the video that he made. You could tell he was somebody who's well-schooled in the ways of being Black in America. He taped that whole thing. His sister put it on social media. And by Tuesday, 30 million people had seen it and knew that the woman was lying. She lost her job by the end of Tuesday afternoon. I personally have not seen that since living here in the United States. And I lived in New York for 15 years. So there is benefit to social media. The viral nature of the communication means things can get around really fast. And we don't have another medium that is so fast. But let's make sure it's correct. Because in the same way that he was able to save his life, because the police could have come and killed him, in the same way that he saved his own life and his own reputation, and she had to bear the consequences for hers, you can destroy people on social media with lies. So be careful how we're using that medium. And remember, it never takes the place of human contact, direct human contact. But while we're socializing, we may have had to just rely on the phone or Zoom. But try to keep that human contact. I'm not saying don't use social media, but don't let it consume your whole day. And whether it's cable news or social media, dissect the source of your information. Make sure it's showing up in several places before you buy into it. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you for that. All right, I have 3 more questions, and in the interest of time, I'm going to stop there. So for 3 more questions, and then that's it. So the next one is, in terms of self-care, what tips can you give for teachers who are now working from home with their students online? What psychological effects will this have on the kids as they prepare to go back to school?
So it's interesting. I think children are more resilient than we believe, right? So first of all, even for the teachers, the children are more savvy than the teachers, because the longer they live in a world with this kind of technology, is the more comfortable they are with it. I'm comfortable with it as a tool, but I know I'm way older. I don't see it as a way of communication for all of my life. So children can be resilient, but there are a couple of things that children need that no technology can provide. Children need structure. So the parents I know who've been successful are the ones who follow this. Start school at home at the same time. Get your children up, dressed, breakfast. Start school at 9 o'clock. If you start work at 8:30, start school at 8:30. Let your children have structure. Believe it or not, they don't do that much schoolwork. They don't do, I'm sorry, correction, please, pardon me. They're not at school doing schoolwork all the time. So doing schoolwork at home means that you will notice your children can finish their work in half of their regular school day. That's because they're not walking around. They're not eating, they're not, walking around changing from one class to another. but you have to have a structure. And try to reward your children for getting their work done by allowing them to do something fun in the afternoons, which A, makes them feel like you respect their hard work, and B, allows you to do your work. If you're a teacher, you are one of the special kind. Underpaid, not enough gratitude. Our society everywhere has failed teachers. As much as parents say thank you, when those same parents become prime ministers or presidents, they don't guarantee that teachers get paid well. There's a problem that we have here. So I just want to honor and acknowledge you, because every single person here, myself included, is a result of a good teacher. You have to do what I said earlier to the question of working at home. You have to have a boundary. You have to set up a structure for your communication. I've heard teachers say that. Everybody isn't the same. You have got to set up a structure for your communication. So the first time you hear from a parent or a kid, because high school kids communicate on their own. For example, younger kids will need their parents to communicate. Set boundaries. I'll take your calls or your texts between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., just like you did when you were in school. You've got to set boundaries because you need to have a life of your own. And you have to develop a way of knowing that at the end of the day, there's always going to be things that are not done. I struggle with that every day. Just accepting that. Just accept that. And recognizing that you need support. So ask your administrators for support, because everybody wasn't ready for this. Everybody didn't have the tools. And if you need help, you need to speak up. And if they're not listening, speak up in groups so that they will be more likely to listen. But the main thing is self-care. You have to take a break. And teachers are notorious not being able to take a break. But some cut it off at 3 or 4 o'clock. But really, realistically, with children all around you, it's hard to take a break. Try not to develop that habit where that extends at home so that you're not taking a break until way into the evening. You know, structure your day. Take a walk, take a breath, make sure that you are taking care of yourself, that you are well rested, that you're getting exercise, and that you're eating properly. Believe it or not, those are good antidepressants, okay? So make sure you are not expending more energy than you're putting into yourself. And here's the big reason why. We have a false belief, and we have a lot of things in our head. We're trying to please people. We don't want to admit that. We feel insecure, so we overwork. We don't want to admit these things. Think about your motive for overworking. Why am I overworking? And always remember, you come first. You know why? Because whatever you are, teacher or any other profession, when you show up at your best, you will perform at your best. When you don't take care of yourself, we're getting a lesser version of you. So if you're caught up in what people are thinking and I can't get it out of your head today, then just think about this. They're going to get your best you when you take care of you.
Thank you. All right. Can you share practical steps persons can take in finding opportunities in light of COVID-19?
When you, opportunities, was there any other question? I mean, is it job opportunities or just opportunities in general?
Just opportunities in general.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Remember that statement, there's a silver lining in every cloud? There is one. There is. It is for real. You have to start to look up. What happens is we get very down and we look down. Start to look up. I don't mean into heaven, but just as a metaphor. What's going to come out of this? New businesses, new ways of doing businesses, new ways of teaching. There's already new ways of doing healthcare, telemedicine, right? Telemedicine existed before this, but almost every medical specialty went into telemedicine. Who knew? Who knew that the doctor didn't have to touch your hand to get your blood pressure reading or your pulse? So just think about, in your own experience, what is emerging for you? Hey, ministers figured out ways to collect the offering a different way, preach a different way. Didn't lose their congregation. In fact, many churches are reporting more visitors online. They were able to connect with people who had moved far away, who couldn't go to church. So there is an opening in every dark cloud. There is a silver lining, but you have to look for it. You have to have the faith to know that it's there. There will be times when you can't see it, but I assure you within a few months, you will see it. You will see that out of this situation, good has come. I have learned a lot in this situation about my ability to communicate without, look at this, without getting dressed up. I would never know all of you, never. I'd have to go to Jamaica, New York, Toronto to see all of you. That's a silver lining. So it exists for everything in life. It certainly exists for COVID-19.
Thank you. And my last question. I have friends who are upset but don't want to tell their children that they aren't comfortable with their friends coming to visit them at home. How do they address this with their children?
So I noticed this. We're back to the science. I told you we had to start with the science, because when people don't understand the science and they don't know how to explain to their children why those decisions are being made, right? So we're trying to protect droplets from going to other people. You cannot congregate in a group. So I've heard parents who've been very successful explaining birthday parties. Listen, at the beginning when we weren't even social distancing, so like, see that birthday party we planned? Not happening. You're gonna bring 3 of your friends and this is it. We're gonna go outside. We're gonna minimize contact. This was even before stay at home. And kids have not rebelled. I have watched teenagers in my practice, 17-year-olds, who haven't seen their girlfriend for weeks. I had one client who was so attached to his girlfriend, that was the problem. The parents were like, this is not healthy. Help us, Dr. Muir. And I have watched this young man, seen his girlfriend twice in 8 weeks. And he's like, I'm okay. We have to give people, young people, information. And secondly, we have to practice what we preach. They watch us. We have to practice what we preach. That's how they believe us. But you have to explain the science. And remember what I said. You explain it at the age of the child. So when you say your friends can't come over, you explain the droplets, the transmission, why you have to, you get some resistance, you keep explaining. You get more resistance, you say, honey, I want to make sure that you or your friend don't infect somebody in your home or their home and somebody dies. So we want to make sure everybody's alive next year. I think you have to be a really cool and callous kid if you can't get that. But you have to lay it out to them. We are preventing death. This is not the flu. This is a very dangerous, very highly contagious virus that is very much more destructive. I believe the estimates are 20% more destructive than influenza. You've got to tell your teenagers that. And then you have to ask them, do you want to see your teenagers, your friends next year? Do you want their parents to be alive or you want them to be orphaned? Because we're talking about, you may think you're healthy, but you may be carrying it and you're gonna bring it over there. I can't allow you to do that. But you have to give them the information, not just mommy said, give them the science behind it at their age
level. Jermaine, where is he gone?
He's back.
Yes, I need his, yes, I need him now. Dr. Muir, thank you so much for, wow, an awesome period of discussion.
What was a good thing, Denzel?
Sorry, what?
I hope what was a good thing. You said, wow, like, I want to make sure it was a good thing.
Yeah, it was good. That question about the neighbor thing, it's mine. Because I think people are changing. I'm seeing it. People are waving and coming out and cutting the lawn and you know, having a cup of coffee and talking across the road, that kind of thing. So it's happening.
Nice.
Our last item on the agenda is Jermaine. He will be just saying thanks to us. So I'll turn it over to him because I don't want to decide on how he says that.
So everyone would agree with me that it was a wonderful session, quite informative, practical, and excellently delivered. Our presenter, Dr. Joan Muir, was very capable based on how she speaks and the depth of how she was able to cover the questions that were asked, some of which I thought were really tough questions. So she's touched on a diversity of areas to which we can all relate, from the family, the workplace, our social interaction, and indeed all of us who listen can identify with the area she touched, and it was quite impactful in helping us to cope with this new normal. So Dr. Muir, on behalf of the Arden Alumni Association, we want to extend appreciation for making this session possible. We want to extend a special thanks to the team of persons who worked in the background to make this session possible. Firstly, Rosemary Henry, who was very instrumental in making the connection with Dr. Muir, and for ably managing the question and answer section. I think she did a fantastic job in just coordinating the question aspect of this webinar. Thank you very much, Rosie.
Thank you, Rosie.
And to the other team members, Denzel, Audley, the International Committee, the presidents, thank you all for putting this, putting this idea together. And I think you guys deserve a tremendous round of applause for what you have done. And to all the other persons who were able to make this webinar, the JAAHS, members of the Arden Alumni Association, and the various executive members, chapter presidents, and all the guests, I just want to say thank you all for joining this call. Over back to you then, Andy.
Thank you again. Well, there's not much more I can say. So I think right now we will break, and my personal thanks again, Dr. Muir. And remember, we need to have breakfast when I come down to Florida.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. I am going to exit since I'm not an Arden alumni, but it's been my pleasure, and it's wonderful to connect with so many people. I didn't realize how many people I know would be on this call. So I hope that I have helped you all, and it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ardenites and visitors, thank you so much for coming. And this is where it ends.